Indiana Jones lived just up the road from me? How a tiny railroad town on the New Mexico-Colorado border became Indiana Jones's childhood home. Written and read by yours truly, Oakie McDoakie. Screw-ups and all. Antonito, Colorado is a tiny town just north of the New Mexico-Colorado border, strung along US 285. About 52 miles as the crow flies from Taos and 40 from Hippie's End. For years, I knew it mainly as a weed stop. Back before New Mexico legalized recreational marijuana, but before Colorado already had, Antonito, population 634, somehow supported 3 cannabis dispensaries and 0 gas stations. Commerce! It always reminded me of those county line liquor stores in Texas, propped up by a patchwork of Baptist-inspired liquor laws. One day, though, something else caught my eye. I had stopped at the tiny Lowe's market to buy some hot fried chicken from the deli. They sell Charlie Biggs fried chicken. Pricey, but pretty good. I love New Mexico and New Mexican food, but for reasons I still don't fully understand, decent fried chicken is hard to come by. Ditto biscuits. Anyhow, I'd parked in the grocery store's south side lot. As I got out of the van, I looked east. There sat a house that felt familiar. Quite familiar. The mailbox read Jones, which was enough to make me stop and stare. Sure enough, a bit of poking around confirmed it. This was the childhood home of Indiana Jones, as seen in the opening scenes of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Since 2017, it's been a bed and breakfast, complete with memorabilia. From the curb, the house looks like a perfectly ordinary Victorian-era place. It was built in 1888, one of Antonito's first houses. Inside, though, pieces from the film linger. A set door here, a prop there. Little reminders that this dusty town once invited Hollywood in. And yes, that includes some interior shots, not just the exterior. I say all this as if I've actually been inside. I haven't. I'm turning in this essay incomplete. I'd intended to take a tour before finishing. They advertise free tours on a billboard in town. But events conspired against me. Events being my van suddenly blowing the starter. At the time of writing, I've rented a U-Haul van for essential trips, but since they partly charge by the mile, no field trips. Not even for you, the people. I'll make it there one of these days to look around and ask some questions that I couldn't find answers for online. Could be an interesting Part 2 article. Back to the house and how it got into the movie. Once I realized that tiny house in Antonito was a set in the third Indiana Jones movie, my question was, what the hell is this doing here? I know film scouts wander far and wide, but Antonito is pretty damn remote. Why not a house in California? Why not a studio set? Why choose a third filming location just for a brief domestic scene? The answer, it turns out, had little to do with the house itself, or so I strongly suspect. The real draw was the cumbrous and Toltec Scenic Railroad, a historic narrow-gauge line with one end in Antonito and the other in Chama, New Mexico. Spielberg and company needed a railroad of the right vintage, early 20th century or older, for the circus train sequence where young Indiana evades the treasure hunters. The cumbrous and Toltec not only looked right, it was still operational as a tourist line and rentable for filming. The line was originally built in the 1880s as part of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad's narrow-gauge empire. The same system that included the Chile line, which ran just west of my home and Taos, connecting Santa Fe to Alamosa, Colorado. I wrote more about that in an earlier article. These railroads weren't built for romance or scenery. They were built to move timber, ore, livestock, and supplies through rough country as cheaply as possible. Narrow gauge meant tighter curves, steeper grades, and fewer dollars spent blasting mountains into submission. Comfort was not a design priority. Survival and profit were. Most of these lines disappeared once trucks and highways took over. The Chile line was torn up for scrap during World War II. The cumbrous and Toltec survived because when the Denver and Rio Grande Western abandoned its remaining narrow-gauge routes in the late 1960s, Colorado and New Mexico jointly stepped in and kept this stretch alive. Instead of freezing it behind glass, they kept the trains running. When Hollywood came calling, it was one of the few narrow gauges still running. That authenticity is what put Antonito on screen. You can still ride the cumbersome Toltec today. I never have, an oversight I'm eager to fix. Anyhow, once they had the train, they needed a town. After escaping the treasure hunters, young Indiana Jones rides home with Coronado's cross tucked into his belt. He needed a place to live, and my best guess, though I found no document spelling this out, is that since the production was already based in Antonito, the crew chose a nearby house that matched the period and the mood. Small, dusty, unassuming. Antonito itself became part of the set. And the rest, as they say, is movie history. I can confirm that the scenery during the train fight and after in Antonito is 100% local to south central Colorado. The dusty town, the sagebrush flats, the aspen forest up in the Tusas Mountains. What's not local is the Red Rock Desert at the very beginning of the opening sequence, the Boy Scout horseback trip. It was filmed elsewhere, in and around Arches National Monument near Moab, Utah. That's the country Edward Abbey wrote about in Desert Solitaire. I recognized it immediately on a rewatch. Red Rock country exists all over the Colorado Plateau, including parts of New Mexico, but a few frames gave it away. The snow-capped La Salle Mountains are visible in the background. Having spent time out there in my wanderings, I knew them when I saw them. A quick search confirmed it. The cave interior was a movie set, by the way. Different landscapes stitched together. A railroad town pressed into service. That's the quiet trick of filmmaking. Geography becomes suggestion, or distraction, the magician's oldest move. It's how a real house and a real train in tiny Antonito ended up standing in for an imaginary hero's high adventure. But really, stop into Lowe's Market for Charlie Big's fried chicken. Best you'll find for hundreds of miles. P.S. The Indiana Jones bed and breakfast looks worth a visit, or an overnight stay if you happen to be passing through Antonito. It's 420 friendly. By all accounts, riding the cumbersome Toltec is absolutely worth it, especially if you've got kids. There's not a lot else to do in town, but that's part of the appeal. It's a nifty little place. Quiet, too. And there's plenty of other cool things nearby in the San Luis Valley, like visiting Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve, or stopping by a few Amish stores. And look for an article I wrote about those, too. If you like this, you can tip me on ko-fi.com/Oakie McDoakie or follow me on Substack and the socials. Just go to oakiemcdoakie.com. Until next time, don't let the bastards wear you down.